What's going on, guys? This question comes from Valjean Lemoine, and he's asking about any wisdom or life philosophy around getting into competitive powerlifting later in life. He says 37 plus, so I'm assuming he's 37 years old. I have a little bit of insight. Now, I'm only 34, but I feel like I'm 62. And that's because of the stupid shit I did to my body when I was in my teens. So I do have a little bit of wisdom on how to keep yourself in one piece, which gets important as you get older. Now, the benefit of starting later is generally you don't come in with all the wear that people accrue when they are young athletes, when they're in their teens, early 20s, because that's when we're full of piss and vinegar. That's when we have the most motivation and the least insight as far as what we're doing. So not only do we do everything wrong, but we do it wrong with a lot of gusto. So there is a benefit. 37 is not that old. I mean, guys can continue to get strong, especially if you're starting out late. You might continue to see increases into your 40s and 50s. I know guys that started late. I just had a phone conversation, a consultation from a gentleman from Baltimore who said specifically he started lifting a little later. He's, I think, in his early 50s now, and he's stronger than he's ever been. So that is actually a possibility. So it's not that, the window has closed. That's not a thing. My recommendation is to start on, well, first of all, read some things. There's some books out that specifically deal with training. I recommend Andy Baker's stuff. He's really good. He has a book called The Barbell Prescription, which is about training into older age, like into your 50s. And that'll just give you some insight on what to expect as your body changes and as things wind down. It's basically going to tell you can't quite go as hard. Recovery is a bigger factor. Basically, it's a lot of the same wisdom that you should be giving kids, but we wait until people beat themselves up before we actually start to implement those types of protocols. So really, I would just recommend doing a simple, basic progression, not going crazy with a bunch of exercise. Focus on skill acquisition. Treat the movements like skill. Have a very high standard for what constitutes a good rep as far as speed and technique. Don't get in the habit of doing a lot of max effort work. Don't get in the habit of doing a lot of grindy, fatigued work. Don't go in trying to beat yourself into the ground. It should be 100% about setting a baseline of work, again, focusing on skill acquisition and progressing that work forward in a very predictable way. Now, that is my general advice for everybody, but given where you're starting, you're going to get more out of this. You're going to grow very fast, and you're also going to avoid a lot of the problems that might come in the form of overuse issues or of just general fatigue. When you do get to that point where you hit the gym a little bit too hard, too many weeks in a row, and then you wonder what the hell's going on. So really the advice is just a little more attention paid to recovery. That's it. But you do that, everybody has to do it the same way. You have to take notes on what you're doing, chart how you feel, chart what happened to your lifts and your energy levels day to day. And if it becomes unsustainable, start to peel back the work, push hard efforts out a little bit farther. That's really about it. Honestly, if you are starting from just bare bones, if you're starting from scratch, then you want to look at a very simple linear progression. I'm a big fan of the Grayskull LP for how simple it is and how effective it is. Starting strength is fine. Those very slow, simple linear progressions that kind of introduce you to the barbell, I do recommend those for people that are starting at zero with really no instruction. It takes a lot of the guesswork out. Now, assuming you have some athletic background or you do have some training background, and you're talking really specifically just about tapering into powerlifting, then we're talking about starting at a little more of an advanced position. Now, if you're used to lifting, you should already know what your body can kind of tolerate right now. So you want to make the same decisions. Things aren't going to deviate that much. Now, a really good friend of mine, George Ondies, he actually was a big help to me early on when I got the gym started. He started powerlifting, I think, in his late 50s, early 60s. I don't want to date the man, but I think he might be pushing 70 at this point. He's getting close. George is actually a pretty decent powerlifter. He competes in the 181s. He's gotten over a 300-pound squat. He's gotten, mid-high threes on the deadlift, bench over 200 pounds, but not bad for a guy that started late, has injuries. He was in the military. He has a blown shoulder. He has some issues that he has to work around, and he still managed to pull out pretty decent numbers considering where he started. And watching him train, not a lot of what he does looks different than what anybody else would be prescribed. And the important takeaway I took from that is that with every person, you have to start with that thread, that baseline of, okay, this is where we're starting. This is our baseline of work. As you progress, you take notes on how fast you can progress, how often you have to deload, how much work is appropriate for a given workout or in a given week. And those are things every individual has to dial in. So even if we separate people by weight class or age group or whatever else, there's still so much variation within those groups that people still have to find out what works for them. So on the one hand, you don't want to treat yourself like you're made of glass. On the other hand, you do have to be intelligent and measured. You do have to pay attention more. So that's about the best answer I could give you. I would recommend if you're starting late, you're not going to be the guy that starts with that big bodybuilding or power building stint in his 20s, and then eventually you've built all this mass, and then you go more into true blue powerlifting. You're going to want to train a little more specifically. I would have more of your work made up by just the main movements, copious amounts of, let's say, upper back work and abdominal work. But for everything else, the main movements will probably be, you'll be best suited if they're the driving developmental force, because starting later, you have less time to kind of hone those specific skills. And that's what I would see. And also, I think it makes it easier to manage recovery when you have fewer variables. So whittling down the movement selection might help with that. That's really all I have. I mean, the rest, like I said, is just set a baseline, progress forward, take notes. If something isn't working, make a small adjustment and continue. And that's really it. In the next couple of years, you should make some very big discoveries on what you can handle and what's appropriate for you. So thanks for watching, guys. Leave any questions you have in the comment box and I'll get to them. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.